In San Francisco, a 31-year-old Hollywood actor is called up.
In April 1942, they call Ronald Reagan up to active duty.
And read the next line, Captain Reagan.
He goes out to San Francisco to Fort Mason, and he gets a physical.
America has been attacked, and patriotic men are marching off to fight. And my father wants to be a part of this because that is what you do if you're a man of honor and you love your country and you want to fight for your country.
EDF, CZP.
He was memorizing the eye chart in order to pass the eyesight test, which he never would have been able to pass, in a straightforward way. That sounds about right for my father.
Perhaps you could read this.
And when the doctors were examining, he said, with your bad eyesight, you'd probably wind up shooting at one of your own generals.
And the other doctor chimes in, yeah, and you'd probably miss. So Reagan's eyesight disqualifies him from any kind of combat role in World War II.
Ronald Reagan was incredibly disappointed that he would not see action during the war, but he was determined to find some way that he could serve his country. And in fact, he found the perfect vehicle for his talents, and it would shape the way the entire country would see him.
In Massachusetts, a high school prep student decides to enlist.
George Bush is a senior at Andover. He hears the news, as all the boys did, that Pearl Harbor has been attacked. He immediately wants to go and enlist. He finds out at the recruiting station that he is only 17 years old and ineligible. He waits until his 18th birthday, June 12th, 1942, immediately after Andover graduation.
The speaker at his graduation is Henry Stimson, the Secretary of War, who tells the young graduates to stay in school. What America really needs at that point are leaders, and what leaders need is an education. His father hopes that he'll go on to college instead of enlisting in the war.
Prescott Bush begs him not to.
And George Bush says, "No, sir, I'm going in." He doesn't just enlist in the war effort. He signs up for the most dangerous job in the war.
He decides he wants to be a naval aviator because he always wanted to fly. He was the youngest naval aviator in American history. The choices he made to continue serving his country laid a foundation for the rest of his life.
Lyndon Johnson reported for active duty 3 days after Pearl Harbor, but hasn't seen action yet. As a member of the House Naval Affairs Committee, he negotiates his way onto a bombing mission. Congressman Johnson has no military experience, a fact that doesn't escape the bomber crew.
They're looking at Johnson as though he's crazy. Why would he want to do this?
We'll need this.
It's the first time a member of Congress will go into combat in World War II.
Military service is an important part of one's career path if you have political aspirations, particularly for somebody as politically savvy and strategic and ambitious as Lyndon Johnson.
Besides serving his country, Johnson sees wartime action as a way to advance his political career.
Johnson needed to make his mark on the world, and he was going to do it through politics.
These missions are extraordinarily dangerous. It's not uncommon that a quarter of those who board those planes won't come back. LBJ knows it could be a suicide mission, and yet he wants to experience it. He wants to know what those men are going through, and I think he wants to test himself in battle.
And he is sitting there for a while on the tarmac before the plane takes off. And he's sitting there longer and longer and longer until he realizes that he needs to relieve himself. So he decides to get off the Wabash Cannonball. He goes to the bathroom, and when he gets back, Johnson gets onto another plane, the Heckling Hare.
40 minutes into the mission, the bomber approaches its target, a Japanese airbase.
Look, we've blown a generator on the starboard engine!
With the engine out, they become easy prey for Japanese Zeros.
He's coming around again!
Now, they are the target.
Here he is with an engine out, going up against Japanese Zeros that are faster than the American bombers, have more maneuverability than the American bombers.
They're everywhere! Take him down!
You wonder whether you're gonna live or die in that moment.
He's coming!
Knowing that, in a lot of respects, it's not up to you what happens next.
He's coming!
On a mission to investigate Allied war supplies, 33-year-old Congressman Lyndon Johnson's bomber is taking fire from an enemy Zero.
You can hear the bullets clanging on the fuselage of the plane, and yet he seems to hold himself together. In fact, more than hold himself together. He seems to be quite courageous.
He was exhilarated by the excitement, by being in a kind of crisis situation. He was in the midst of combat, and he was mastering it.
After an hour and 17 minutes, the bomber heckling Hare limps back to base. Johnson has cheated death.
He's tested himself in battle, which for every young man is the ultimate in one's test of one's own character, assessing how you're going to do in the heat of battle.
But one aircraft never returns. The original plane that Johnson boarded, the Wabash Cannonball, crashes, killing all the crew.
This is one of these accidents of history, whereby for one moment, for Johnson having to go to the bathroom at a particular moment, Johnson would have been on the Wabash Cannonball. And the subsequent history of the United States and the world may have changed.
In the South Pacific, Lieutenant Richard Nixon's airbase has been bombed for a solid month. After one raid, Nixon counts 35 bomb craters within 100 feet of his air raid bunker.
Must have had a tremendous transformative effect on Richard Nixon, realizing what it truly means to be out in the open. To have nowhere to hide. Have no defenses. And that's part of the World War II experience for Richard Nixon. He knows what combat is, and later as commander-in-chief, he's going to relive those moments.
You're tired, you're exhausted, and so to get back to a place where you can just relax and have something as simple as a hot meal makes all the difference in the world.
Nixon becomes a very popular guy in World War II for the first time in his life.
Nixon was not a naturally happy person, but he seems to have been about as happy as he could get in wartime.
He opens Nick's Snack Shack, and he's able to give guys coming back from the front a little taste of home. Hamburgers and beer.
I was about the most popular officer in the South Pacific because of that hamburger stand. They were pretty good.
You could draw a parallel between Richard Nixon's Snack Shack and his later politics. His going for things that he knows are popular and that will win him political points, get him into office, and keep him in office.
He's wheeling and dealing a little bit. He's able to horse trade. to swap Japanese rifles for a bottle of whiskey.
He bends the rules in order to get this stuff, and bending the rules seems to work.
He was now one of the guys. He would play cards, and in particular poker.
My technique was to play it very close to the vest. I knew when to get out of a pot. I didn't stick around when I didn't have the cards. I didn't bluff very often.
He's shrewd. He makes about $10,000, which in modern dollars is more like $100,000. It's a lot of poker money.
Nixon is able to use it later on to fund his political campaign.
With the Philippines under Allied control and the Japanese Navy in disarray, the U.S. now has a clear run to advance on Tokyo.
Ultimately, you can bring to bear your real advantage, which is American air power.
And the U.S. has devastating new air technology. The B-29 Super Fortress is the ultimate bomber, flying at 31,000 feet. To help identify key targets in Japan, the U.S. Air Force turns to a future president for help. Captain Ronald Reagan, and the first motion picture unit in Hollywood. The unit supports the war effort by making recruitment and training films.
And in 1944, they began an especially sensitive project, training pilots for bombing runs over mainland Japan.
Reagan begins work on the assignment. It is known as Special Film Project 152.
It's a top secret thing. In fact, in his memoir, Reagan later compares it as the kind of secret that's comparable to Project Manhattan, building the atom bomb. The Army First Motion Picture Unit would take photographs of war zones throughout the world, and that included Tokyo. From these photographs and footage, they built this detailed model of Tokyo and the approach to Tokyo.
Pilots who were going to be staging bombing raids on Tokyo would basically watch these, we would call them sort of simulation films almost. And they would see, okay, this is what the approach to Tokyo looks like.
The camera is now ready to roll. In effect, the camera is now a B-29.
Reagan voices the film.
Your target for this mission will be the Japan International Aircraft Company, Hiratsuka plant, with the nearby Hiratsuka Navy Arsenal as the secondary objective. The mouth of the Sagami River lies below this island.
Reagan would provide visual clues for the bombers. He would say things like, you're approaching Honshu Island, the main island of Japan. You'll see inlets here, a river here.
Notice that the target is made up of large, single-storied buildings set closely together.
Reagan really felt that this was a huge contribution to the war effort, even though he wasn't on the battle lines.
But this was it for Reagan, who didn't have an opportunity to actually fight in the war. Special Project 152 gave him a real opportunity to play an operational part in the success of the war.
Ronald Reagan's work helps the B-29 pilots to target Tokyo.
Upon reaching Mount Fuji, alter course to 94 degrees true. The target lies beyond
with devastating accuracy. They have one of the highest strike rates of the war.